Reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 15. Are you ready? 1, 2, 15. 1, 2, 15. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yad anudyasina yukta karma grantina bandhanam chindanti kovidas tasya kona kuryat kataratim yad anudyasina yukta karma granti nibandhanam chindanti kovidas tasya kona kuryat kataratim. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work karma by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his messages? Purport. The contact of the spiritual spark with the material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from actions and reactions of fruitive work. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This is because all the activities of the Supreme Lord, his Leela, are transcendental to the modes of the material energy. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. Paragraph. Liberation from the material bondage is therefore a byproduct of devotional service. Attainment of spiritual knowledge is not sufficient to ensure liberation. Such knowledge must be overcoated with devotional service so that ultimately the devotional service alone predominates. Then liberation is made possible. Even the reactionary work of the fruitive workers can lead one to liberation. Interesting statement. When it is overcoated with devotional service. Karma overcoated with devotional service is called karma yoga. Similarly, empirical knowledge overcoated with devotional service is called jnana yoga. But pure bhakti yoga is independent of such karma, again, because it alone can not only endow one with liberation from conditional life, but also award one the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Paragraph. Therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, by glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshiping him always without cessation. That is the perfect way of devotional service. The Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures of transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of the different castes and orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. So one of the key concepts in this verse is the binding knot of reactionary work, and or parentheses karma. But it's not explicit, but implicit or implied that false ego is at work. In other words, one of the things that keeps people doing fruitive work is fruitive work. Past fruitive work pushes the living entity to do similar fruitive work. As the modes mix, then their fruitive work might also mix from the past to the future or the present, but it's the past fruitive work that pushes. And behind that pushing, there's time, and one gets involved with time, the past, present, and future kind of time, instead of eternal time, due to false ego. False ego is the most subtle of the material coverings. It's according to the process of creation that's described in Canto 3 and other places. The living entity that enters into the Mahatattva by the glance of Mahavishnu, the very first thing that happens is false ego receives and covers that living entity. And then other coverings and other coverings. At the very bottom is the false ego covering. And therefore it's the first thing that brings one to a material existence, and it keeps one in material existence, and the whole show keeps going by that force of false ego, or the misconceiving of oneself to be a product of matter. And sure enough, it's very strong. Sure enough, it's very strong. The idea of of karma yoga, outlined very briefly here, is people are attached to fruitive work, and so there's a process by which that fruitive work can be A and B. It can be engaged in according to the injunctions of Scripture, that is dharmic fruitive work, as opposed to adharmic or just whimsical fruitive work. So a dharmic person engages in fruitive work guided by dharma. But that guided by dharma is karma kanda, not karma yoga. And karma yoga is when, using Prabhupada's language here, it's coated with devotional service. That's the yoga part. Karma kanda becomes karma yoga. So it's a mix, another way of saying mixed bhakti, karma mishra bhakti, or karma yoga. And then in the yoga ladder, that when the pursuit of knowing who one is beyond the covering of the body and fruitive activities by the body comes gyan, or distinguishing, separating one's identity from the covering and the fruitive activities. So then one may become situated in jnana, pursuit of jnana, and jnana, when it's mixed or coated, using language here, with bhakti, then it's jnana yoga. So there are jnanis that aren't jnana yogis. They're jnanis that study the Vedas, and they're not jnana yogis, because it's coated with bhakti, jnana yoga. So a jnani isn't going to become situated in something that's stable, quite unstable. And then different. This jnani, that jnani, the other jnani having this idea, that idea, the other idea, or conception. When it's following the codes of the Vedas, And there's a coding of bhakti that is not just knowing who I am distinct from the covering, but trying to connect with the Supreme, and trying to connect with the Supreme, and the language being presented here is coated by bhakti. So, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, or Jnana Yoga. The terms aren't exactly identical because they're different terms, but they're quite the same. They're very much the same. And then bhakti that's unmixed. Bhakti that's unmixed. Rupa Goswami has taken the message of the Bhagavatam and made it, extracted its essence. So his definition of bhakti is without karma and gyan. So when you take karma and gyan away, it's what's left. And if there's pursuit of knowing who you are, and karma and gyan are taken away, then there's the possibility, it's not by default, but it's the possibility of bhakti that's unmixed. So that's the position of intelligence, the intelligent persons, to get there, to this place that is being described in this verse, with sword in hand. They cut that knot. So it's karma and false ego. Not just karma, it's not just false ego. It's karma and false ego, and they're intimately connected. That is to say, fruit of activities is the byproduct, or is a downstream, it's a further covering from false ego, misidentification with matter. And I want to be happy, so I do some work because it's going to bring happiness, although notionally it brings happiness, but it doesn't. It brings further implication in material existence, and that's not what happiness is. But one accepts it to be happiness. In Prahlad Maharaj's prayers, not in prayers, his instructions to his classmates, and just after saying that in the tender age of childhood, Komara Acharat Pragyo, Dharman Bhagavata Hiha, he explains to his classmates that those that don't do that, they don't do that because they're asat, grahat. Their place of shelter, griha, their place of shelter is asat. And so they undergo so many miseries. So he's advising his friends, don't do that. This is all new to them because they're sons of demons. They've never heard it before. In school, they're taught something else. Shanda and Amarka are teaching them something else. Similarly to our modern education system, people are not trained in sat. They're trained in asat, and taking shelter of asat, and becoming bewildered by asat, and accepting that as reality, and accepting the misery that goes with it as happiness. It's really strange. And not knowing any alternative. Therefore, the impetus of Prahlad and the impetus of our great acharyas, Prabhupada being an outstanding example, is tireless. He gave his life, traveled the world, and taught and wrote, and to give this knowledge to people that are suffering and thinking that their suffering is enjoyment. It's really silly or sad. So without hearing the transcendental position, so the emphasis here is intelligent people will hear. And just hearing topics about Krishna has that effect. It chips away, like the sword that chips away at the bondage of karma and false ego. It's a hard knot, so it doesn't cut so quickly and easily. However, if one continues the way that he's saying it in this purport is nonstop and without cessation, as the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan showed by example. And in addition to their example, they wrote literatures, and persons can follow in their footsteps. And therefore, it's recommended again and again and again to be followers of the 6 Goswamis. Followers in the sense of not giving up hearth and home and going to Vrindavan and living as a mendicant with simply a loincloth and living under a tree or something, but following in the path of the principle that they accepted. And it's easier said than done, but that's the remedy specifically for the disease of material existence, or the bondage of material existence, that can be cut by this sword. Back to the verse, and we'll end. See if there's discussion. With sword in hand, yat anudya asina. That's the sword of remembrance. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knot of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? Well, people that aren't intelligent or misfortunate just because they haven't been trained. And that's a lot of people. Like the world's population largely haven't been trained. So we're getting the opportunity at least to be trained, to become proper Vaishnavas, and the recipients of all this nice cessation of the bondage of fruitive work, and remembrance again, because that's in the verse, remembrance again, because we've forgotten, of Krishna and our relationship with Krishna and his abode, and filling the mind and eventually filling the heart with the aspiration to achieve that, regain that position. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Discussion.
Small clarification of my understanding. So without bhakti, the following of the dharma is karma kanda or jnana kanda, like that.
Yeah.
And then with bhakti becomes the
It can be mixed, and then it can become pure.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's an example. Not so long ago, it was the month of Kartik. And at the end of Kartik, there's Bhishma Panchika. And there was a group of devotees that were really getting into it. You know, what are the recommended austerities for Bhishma Panchika? And one devotee asked those who were trying to follow Bhishma Panchika, why are you doing this? And the answer was weight loss. Not to say there's no benefit, but the ultimate benefit is not in the mind of at least those individuals. So doing dharma is nice, but one should do dharma with the right purpose. And even these are devotees, so they have a sense of the right purpose, but having a sense of and doing with that purpose are two different things.
Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for the lecture. You mentioned about the intelligent man cut the knot, and Srila Prabhupada is a wonderful example
Yeah.
for our sampradaya. Can I ask one question, that why are there not many intelligent person? And when Srila Prabhupada translates that, who will not pay attention to his message?
Well, how thick is our conditioning? How many, not just years, how many lifetimes and tendencies and tendencies and tendencies and tendencies and yes, there are layers and layers and layers and layers. So the covering is thick, so it's not a surprise. Now, supposing somebody is sincere, it may take lifetimes and lifetimes. That's okay. But your question is, why is it so few? It's just same as in Bhagavad Gita. Manushanam Sahasreshu, etc. It's the pyramid, and there's very few people that are really wanting to know themselves, and really the intelligence is given to those who want to be with Krishna. Then something else is given to those who don't want to be with Krishna. Another kind. Because Krishna is the source and he reciprocates. So it's rare. No surprise.
There's a question online.
Oh.
Please explain a sentence from Srila Prabhupada's purport. Even the reactionary work of the fruitive workers can lead one to liberation when it is overcoated with devotional
It's the dovetail principle. That is, you have something? No. The dovetail principle is, supposing I like music. So I can dovetail my music liking to music liking and kirtan. Some people do that. They mix music, and kirtan, and music, and they're so they can spiritualize the music propensity and so forth. Some people like cooking, some people like thising and thating, and so they can spiritualize by connecting at least some portion. They like earning money. Collect that tendency to direct that tendency. Some portion of their earning goes to Krishna, and then gradually, purification. Material can become spiritualized gradually. It's not instant. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki. Oh, you have something. Yes. Okay.
So, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So you mentioned that the purification happens gradually. So how to be motivated?
How to be motivated? Sadhu Sangha.
So sometimes it is very disappointing, like when we are getting some anarthas.
Don't have low self-esteem. Be saying good association. How does bhakti begin? By the association of those carrying bhakti. How does bhakti get furthered? By sadhu sangha. And with sadhus, you do what sadhus do. And when you do that, you find, oh my God, look at all this stuff. I had no idea. I was oblivious. I was in ignorance. And look at this stuff. Oh boy. Prabhupada gives this example. Supposing you go into a house that's been neglected for years and you start to clean. What happens? Dust all over the place. Keep cleaning. And eventually, it's clean. Simple example, but it's like that. So supposing you didn't start bhakti, or some people don't start bhakti, it doesn't mean they're clean. And you start cleaning and there's stuff. And more, and there's more, and there's more. And then your standards of cleanliness become higher and higher. And you just keep, you stay with the process faithfully. So know what the process is and follow it faithfully. Welcome to the club. The Anartha Nivritti Club. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.